My daughter, Erin, now a college student, has been living independently for about a year despite receiving a reasonable monthly allowance and supposedly dedicating herself to a part-time job. When Erin returned home, she looked worn out and thin. "Are you pushing yourself too hard? Are you getting enough to eat?" I asked with concern. "I'm managing with things like cereal," she replied, "but I crave more." Yet Erin fell silent, confirming my uneasy suspicions. She thanked me, saying, "Thanks for the $13 a month, Mom." I couldn't believe what I heard. $13? I've been transferring $1,300 every month. My name is Laura. People have always said I have poor judgment in men. My first boyfriend in college cheated on me within 3 months. Then I dated a younger guy who became a freeloader, likely because I was footing the bills. The man I married after 4 years of dating turned out to be both a spendthrift and a cheat. After divorcing him, I raised Erin as a single mom for 10 years. Erin, whom I once perceived as young and naive, has matured into a dependable daughter, taking the lead in household chores. Despite my insistence that she need not exert herself so much, she remains steadfast, asserting, "You're already doing so much for us, Mom. I worry you'll burn out if I don't help." Moreover, Erin never slacks in her studies. "I want to contribute like you, Mom. I don't want to be a burden," she expresses, diligently preparing for her college entrance exams since her high school days. Though she may exhibit traces of naivety, I wholeheartedly believe she's an exceptional daughter. After diligent studying, Erin received the long-awaited acceptance letter from a prestigious public university. Together, we eagerly searched the bulletin board until we spotted Erin's applicant number, and we clasped hands in joy. As the days swiftly passed before her college journey began, we decided to take a celebratory hot spring trip, relishing every moment of the relaxation. While immersed in the soothing warmth up to my shoulders, I glimpsed my daughter, her cheeks rosy with contentment, and I found her endearing words, "Mom, this is so wonderful," deeply touching. In that serene moment, I silently vowed to protect her with all my heart, no matter what challenges lay ahead. As Erin embarked on her college journey, she left the nest with a blend of pride in her growth and a hint of loneliness. I bid her farewell, watching her set off on her new path. Since Erin began living independently, our nightly phone calls became a cherished ritual. With her knack for household chores and reliability beyond her years, I didn't harbor major concerns about her solo living arrangements. Yet the notion of a young woman navigating life alone stirred a lingering unease within me. I questioned if my worries were excessive, but Erin's cheerful conversations each evening brought me solace. Those end-of-day calls became my much-needed moments of relaxation. Erin would often share details about her college life, her classes, her new friends, her involvement in the music club, and the intriguing upperclassmen she encountered there. Hearing about her vibrant daily experiences filled me with joy. Near the semester's end, Erin's voice carried a hint of tension as she shared, "You know what?" To my delight, she revealed the happy news. "I've started dating someone." The lucky guy was Ian, the senior she met at the club. While I congratulated her with genuine enthusiasm, a twinge of concern lingered within me. As the daughter of someone often deemed unlucky in love, I couldn't shake the worry that perhaps my own romantic misfortunes had been inherited by her. Sensing my unease, Erin cautiously inquired, "Would you like to meet him someday?" I reassured her with a bright tone, "Absolutely." When summer vacation began, Erin returned home, accompanied by Ian. Upon meeting him, I discovered Ian to be a well-groomed and polite young man. "Pleasure to meet you, I'm Ian. I'm dating your daughter," he greeted me with a firm handshake as soon as I opened the door. His demeanor exuded responsibility, easing any lingering concerns I had. Ian sported no tattoos or piercings, yet carried himself with a refined air. The rolled-up sleeves of his shirt added a touch of classic charm, evoking memories of my own youthful attractions. A curious sense of nostalgia washed over me in his presence. We sat down for iced tea together, and I quickly noticed that Ian was not only responsible but also incredibly thoughtful. He graciously offered to carry the tray of iced tea I had prepared and promptly refilled my empty cup when it ran low. "Ian seems like a really decent guy," I whispered to Erin when he briefly left the table. Erin chuckled shyly. "Well, Mom, you were worried, weren't you?" "Of course, darling. It's only natural for a mother," I replied. Erin laughed. "But honestly, Mom, I'm doing just fine. I think I've got better luck in love than you." We both shared a hearty laugh at that, and I couldn't help but agree. "You might be onto something there." As the second semester commenced, Aaron, determined not to be a burden, took on multiple jobs to support herself. Despite my monthly financial support for emergencies, she seemed intent on saving every penny for the future. Trusted by her employers, Aaron juggled school and worked tirelessly, leaving little time for her club activities. Concerned, I asked, "Are you sure you're managing? Don't hesitate to use the money I send, and do you need me to come help with chores?" Aaron replied softly, "I'm okay," her voice tinged with wariness. Since Aaron couldn't attend the club anymore, Ian began frequenting our home out of concern. "You have your own worries, don't you? I can handle things myself, really. I'm fine," Aaron reassured him. "If you say so," Ian replied, though his worry lingered. One evening, returning from work, I was greeted by the aroma of a surprise hamburger Ian had prepared. It was delicious. Having Ian around makes things easier. Aaron's cheerful tone betrayed her fondness for him. As time passed, Aaron's calls grew less frequent due to her busy schedule. She'd update me sporadically, but it was evident she was juggling a lot. Despite my reassurances, I couldn't shake the worry. Ian made sure she ate well on his visits, but on other days, Aaron resorted to cereal for sustenance. Despite my financial support, it seemed she was struggling. Aaron wasn't one to squander money, so the situation puzzled me deeply. When I confided in my mother, she brushed off my concerns, remarking, "You're worrying excessively about your adult daughter. It's hard to let go." Perhaps she was right. Aaron would turn 19 soon. Though she still seemed like a child to me, the world saw her as an adult, especially with Ian by her side. Maybe I should just trust that she'll ask for help if she really needs it, I mused, attempting to ease my anxiety. Yet finding peace amid my worries proved challenging. Winter break arrived, and Aaron's return home revealed a noticeable change. She appeared thinner than before, her once slender frame now visibly diminished. Dark circles mirrored her tired eyes. When she explained she had been working late the previous night, coming straight home thereafter, concern flooded me. "Aaron, are you pushing yourself too hard lately? Are you eating properly?" I inquired, unable to hide my worry. "I'm eating properly, cereal and such," Aaron responded. Her sudden silence spoke volumes. Hastily she added, "But I've mastered the art of cereal." Her smile strained. It seemed forced, prompting a gnawing worry within me. Was she truly eating well? Despite my consistent financial support and her diligent work, a troubling sensation crept over me. Aaron's next words only heightened my unease. "Thanks for the $13 every month, Mom." "$13? I send you $1,300 every month," I replied, stunned by the revelation. A sense of foreboding gripped me. "Aaron, where do you keep your checkbook and debit card?" "It's in my desk drawer at home," Aaron replied. "I'm heading to your place now, Aaron. There's something I need to check," I announced suddenly. Aaron looked surprised by my abrupt declaration but nodded in agreement. As we rode the train to her apartment, conversation flowed between us. The first topic broached was the matter of her mistaken allowance. Aaron explained that she maintained a living expenses account for her part-time earnings and a savings account where I deposited her allowance. She had recently depleted her savings purchasing textbooks and other necessities for the new semester. When she checked her account balance, it was a mere $78. Despite my consistent financial support, she had never inquired about the exact amount. Assuming the $78 was the sum total of my contributions over 6 months, she calculated it to approximately $13 per month. "Is that about right?" I asked. "I thought so, but I thought you might be struggling too, Mom. Honestly, you're such a silly girl. How much do you think I earned?" "Don't underestimate me," Aaron retorted to my semi-joking remark. Her words seemed to ease the tension momentarily, but a shadow crossed her face once more. It dawned on me why Aaron hadn't accessed the money I sent. Someone must have gained access to her bank account, and the most suspicious candidate was Ian, who frequented her apartment. Aaron appeared to be in denial, and I found myself reluctant to entertain the idea that her seemingly kind boyfriend would be involved in theft. I nervously watched as the train approached the nearest station. Upon reaching Aaron's home, we hurriedly retrieved her checkbook and made a beeline for the nearest ATM at the bank. With evening drawing near and the clock ticking past late afternoon, time was of the essence. We inserted the checkbook into the ATM and anxiously awaited the update. The balance displayed on the checkbook left us both speechless. Despite the consistent deposits of $1,300 each month, there were clear signs of frequent withdrawals. Aaron's complexion paled as she whispered softly, "Why?" Concerned by her visibly strained state, I escorted Aaron to a nearby coffee shop, where I resolved to delve deeper into the issue at hand. My primary focus was understanding how her checkbook was being managed. Erin disclosed that she stored her checkbook and debit card in a locked drawer within her desk. However, the key to this drawer was stored elsewhere, making it accessible to anyone entering the apartment. The only individual with the potential to access her room in her absence was her boyfriend, Ian, who possessed the spare key. Furthermore, the PIN associated with her debit card was the same as the one she commonly used for her other cards. It became evident that someone had likely observed her during a money withdrawal. I must admit, I was careless when setting up the account. I'm sorry, honey. Mom should have been more careful, I confess. I never anticipated someone else would access the money. It's not your fault, Mom. I should have been more vigilant in managing it, Erin responded. Well, we both share responsibility, I interjected, but the person at fault here is the one who spent money without permission. Yeah, you're right, Erin replied, her tone lacking its usual vigor. Understandably so, she had been betrayed by the person she likely trusted the most. Witnessing my daughter so crestfallen tugged at my heartstrings. I'll handle this, I declared unexpectedly. What? You may want to downplay this, but it's a serious offense. We need to gather evidence and report it to the police. The police? Erin's voice quivered, clearly unsettled. Yes, it's necessary, but don't worry. I'll handle everything. It's all to ensure your peace of mind during college, all right? I reassured her, and Aaron nodded reluctantly. A few days later, I sought the help of a private detective agency, the same one that assisted me when my husband was suspected of infidelity. I need you to investigate my daughter's boyfriend. His name is Ian Mack. He's a sophomore in economics at the same university as my daughter. We suspect he may have been misusing the money I've been sending to her, I explained, displaying a photo of Ian from Aaron's messages on my phone. They agreed to take on the case without hesitation, despite their steep fees. It was a necessary expense to resolve this matter for Aaron's sake. As we awaited the results of the investigation, Aaron chose to commute to college from my house due to her anxiety. The journey took over an hour each way, which proved challenging for Aaron, but she found solace in returning home each evening. One night, she prepared granola for dinner. Just like you said, I've become quite the cereal connoisseur, Aaron remarked with a confident wink. My heart ached at the realization that she must have been eating this meal almost daily. A month later, the investigation's findings arrived. There was undeniable evidence that Ian had been making unauthorized withdrawals from Aaron's account. According to the investigator, shortly after Ian and Aaron began dating, his lifestyle markedly improved, as attested by his friends. What shocked me even more was that Ian's transgressions didn't stop there. It turned out he was involved with several other women. I was handed a collection of photographs. Ian with his arm around different women, happily dining at restaurants, enjoying arcades, and strolling through hotel districts. In each image, a man with a distinctive beauty mark, a teardrop tattoo, was unmistakably Ian. It seems Ian hasn't just been using the money you've been sending your daughter to impress his friends, he's also been using it to maintain relationships with multiple girlfriends, the investigator grimly informed me. Thank you, I replied, bowing my head deeply. It was time to take action. I filed a complaint with the police and sent written explanations of Ian's actions to his parents, his university, and all of his girlfriends. Initially, Ian denied everything, but he eventually confessed when confronted by multiple girlfriends. Naturally, all of the girlfriends, including Aaron, severed ties with him. As a result of the police investigation, Ian was expelled from the university and sent back to his parents' home. Fortunately, his parents were reasonable and came to my house with a humble gift to apologize. For the time being, his parents have agreed to reimburse the stolen money. I'll make our stupid son repay this, even if it kills him, Ian's father vowed, his voice choked with emotion. According to what Aaron heard through the grapevine, Ian is now working multiple jobs to repay his parents. By the time this ordeal settled, spring had arrived. To mark the end of this unfortunate chapter, we decided to celebrate Aaron's spring break with our first trip to a hot spring resort in over a year. Erin had managed to reclaim her life since then, her complexion and physique returning to a healthy state. As we soaked in the warm baths, indulged in delicious food from the inn, and relaxed in front of the TV, I felt like we were finally able to enjoy some peace after a long while. Just before drifting off, Aaron's voice came from beneath the covers. "Hey, what's on your mind? Remember how you and Dad split because of his reckless spending and affairs, right?" Aaron's words caught me off guard. My ex-husband, much like Ian, was someone who flaunted wealth to impress others, yet struggled to cover basic expenses due to his extravagant habits and moral lapses. "I served my ex-husband with divorce papers, just as you did with Ian. It seems we have a pattern of choosing similar types of men, don't we?" Aaron offered a rueful smile. "Indeed. We'll have to be more cautious from now on," I replied, trying to sound upbeat despite feeling a bit uneasy. "By the way, you seem happier lately. Did you meet someone special?" "No way, it's not a boyfriend," Aaron exclaimed teasingly. "Could he possibly become one?" Lately, I had been developing a friendship with the investigator assigned to our case, but I hadn't mentioned it to Aaron yet. Even so, was there a spark, or was it just the bond between a mother and daughter who've been through a lot together? "Hang on, are you sure it's going to work out this time, Mom?" Aaron teased with a playful chuckle. "Well, it should, right? Unlike your father, he seems serious and dependable. But let's get serious here. If it's my turn after all this, Mom, it won't be a laughing matter," I replied, adopting a serious tone. "Got it? I'll tread carefully," Aaron responded solemnly. But then, unable to contain our amusement, we exchanged a look and burst into laughter. "My name's Maggie, and I work for a company. I'm 29 years old and just tied the knot with my husband, William. We dated for over 2 years before getting hitched. We kicked off our married life in the apartment I've had since my single days. Dad gifted it to me when I landed this job. With my brother and his wife moving back in with our folks, I figured it was time for me to spread my wings. Dad, being well off, got me a nice apartment close to our family home when I started working. Not sure if he wanted to lend a hand whenever I needed, or just keep me nearby. But either way, I ended up in a fantastic place. When my husband and I decided to tie the knot, his cramped apartment wasn't going to cut it for the both of us. Luckily, I had a spacious place that didn't cost me a dime in rent, so he moved in with me right away. The first time I visited his family's home in a snowy area was during winter. I was blown away by the amount of snow and how chilly it was. Growing up in the city, his family's home felt like a whole new world to me. His mom and brother lived in this quaint old house straight out of a fairy tale, surrounded by fields. Back when my father-in-law was around, they did some farming on the side. Their nearest neighbors were a bit of a hike away. My husband had been living in a tiny apartment, too cramped for both of us. Luckily, I had a spacious place that didn't cost a cent in rent, so he moved in with me right away when we decided to tie the knot. The first time I visited his family's home in a snowy area was during winter. I was amazed by the vast amount of snow and how cold it was. Growing up in the city, his family's home felt like a whole new world to me. His mom and brother lived in this charming old house straight out of a fairy tale. Back when my father-in-law was alive, they used to do some farming on the side. Their house was surrounded by fields, with the nearest neighbors a bit of a trek away. What surprised me even more was that the bathroom was outside the house. I thought I could handle it for short visits, but the idea of living there long-term seemed daunting, especially in winter when it's snowy and freezing. Venturing out to the toilet in the middle of the night takes a lot of bravery. Plus, after a shower, I worried about catching a cold from the chilly temperatures when I visited to meet them for our wedding. I didn't stay overnight, so I didn't experience the shower ordeal, but dealing with the outdoor toilet was definitely tough. However, my mother-in-law and brother-in-law were very kind, which put me at ease. Even though we wouldn't be living together, I wanted to foster a harmonious relationship with them as we became one family, but something nagged at me. While my mother-in-law always greeted me warmly, I noticed she seemed to murmur complaints when alone with my husband. What worried me more was my brother-in-law's previous marriage, which ended in divorce after just a year, a topic my husband avoided discussing. I wanted to ask, but since my husband remained tight-lipped about it, I didn't press the issue. At our wedding, my mother-in-law wore a radiant smile, prompting my father to comment on her kindness. I smiled back, though my own mother had reservations. Despite her smiles in public, she seemed rather sour when she thought no one was watching. "Watch out, she might be two-faced," my mother cautioned. Still, I chose to believe there wouldn't be any problems unless we lived together. We started our married life in the apartment happily, free of worries. However, just 3 months into marriage, my husband began to dump all the household chores on me and make decisions without consulting me. Despite our agreement to share chores since we both worked, he started slacking off. Initially, he helped with tasks like cleaning the bathroom and occasionally cooking dinner when I came home late. But recently, he's become reluctant to do even basic cleaning, leaving me to handle everything, including dinner preparation. Sometimes when I'm cooking after a long day, he'll impatiently demand, "Hurry up, I'm hungry," which only adds to my frustration. Beyond the chores, what really bothers me is his unilateral decision-making. Perhaps there were signs I missed before marriage, or maybe I misjudged him as a decisive and dependable man. Not long after tying the knot, furniture and a sofa suddenly appeared in our home. I was taken aback and asked my husband, "What's going on? Where are we going to put all this new furniture?" He just smiled and said, "I didn't feel the current vibe of our room suited me, so I decided to switch up the furniture for something more to my liking." He wanted to get rid of all the furniture I had chosen and replace it with pieces that matched his taste. If he had talked to me first, we could have picked out furniture together. But he acted on his own, completely disregarding my preferences. It's fine for him to decorate his own space however he wants. But I didn't appreciate him changing our shared living area without discussion. His sense of design didn't seem to make much sense, and I was left speechless by the mismatched colors and shapes of the new furniture. Then came an unexpected proposal. "It'd be great if you could foot the bill for it. After all, this was originally your apartment, right?" I was already frustrated that he had taken over the living room with his tasteless furniture, and now he was asking me to pay for it. I wondered if he was joking and asked again, "What? Why should I pay for it? Besides, it's the furniture you bought on your own." I usually don't speak up, but this time I stood my ground. My husband seemed at a loss for words, but it was clear he didn't want to spend his own money. This year marked our first Christmas since getting married, so we decided to spend the holidays at his parents' place. It was my first time staying at their house, so I was feeling anxious and nervous. My mother-in-law spoke kindly, "Maggie, just relax and make yourself at home." However, I couldn't fully let my guard down, mindful of my mother's advice. I remained cautious, sensing there might be more to my mother-in-law than meets the eye. When I first arrived, she did nothing but rest, sharing stories of how brides used to eat alone in the kitchen in the past. "It's nice that we can all eat together now," I said, puzzled by her tales from yesteryears. I noticed my brother-in-law cautioning her, but my husband seemed oblivious. Enduring her sarcastic remarks, I offered to clean up after dinner. She smiled but declined, saying, "I'll handle it. Wouldn't want you to break any of our precious dishes." That's when I realized my mother's advice was on point. The first day was filled with her biting sarcasm, and unfortunately, things only took a turn for the worse the next day. That evening, my husband went out drinking with friends, and with my brother-in-law away on a fire brigade trip, it was just my mother-in-law and me at home. Honestly, I felt quite nervous. After dinner, while she was in the shower, I finally got a moment to relax. But when she emerged, she said, "I'm off to bed now. Don't forget to lock the front door." I awkwardly replied, "Okay," and prepared to take a shower in the separate bathhouse, which was quite chilly. Locals might be used to it, but for me, it was a bit of a challenge. Once I settled in, the lights in the main house suddenly went out. As I relaxed in the bathtub, I thought I heard footsteps outside, so I stayed still and listened carefully. After a while, everything went pitch dark. Initially, I thought it was a power outage, but when I peeked out the window, I noticed the lights in the neighboring house were still on. That's when I started to suspect if my mother-in-law was playing a mean prank on me. I didn't want to believe she would do something so cruel, but given her tendency to make sarcastic remarks with a smile, a sense of unease began to creep into my heart. Feeling a sense of urgency, I hurried out of the shower, dried off, and changed into my pajamas. The room was completely dark at first, making it hard to see anything. But as my eyes adjusted, the moonlight seeping through the window helped me navigate. While I couldn't help but think how immature this prank was, I attempted to open the door to leave, only to find it stubbornly stuck shut, resisting all my efforts to force it open. Panic started to grip me. There was a window, but it was barred from the outside. Thankfully, I had my smartphone with me. I tried calling my husband for help, but he didn't pick up. On the third attempt, he finally answered, shouting loudly, "Why are you bothering me? Can't you see I'm busy right now?" It was clear he was drunk. But I desperately needed his assistance, so I pleaded with him. "I'm stuck in the bathroom. Please come over right away," I pleaded urgently. But it seemed he either didn't grasp the seriousness or didn't care, replying dismissively, "You shouldn't have taken a shower now. I'm too drunk to help. Goodbye." After he hung up, I dialed his number repeatedly, but it seemed he'd switched off his phone. I debated calling the police or fire department, but I wanted to exhaust all options before resorting to that. I hesitated to involve the authorities, fearing my mother-in-law's wrath. First, I tried to find a way out on my own. I thought perhaps if I shouted from the bathroom window, someone passing by might hear me. But to my dismay, the window was frozen shut. My husband had mentioned that the pipes sometimes freeze. If I were to remain trapped here all night, I could freeze to death. Just as I was on the verge of reluctantly dialing the police, a voice from outside startled me. "Is there a power outage? Hello? Is anyone in there?" Relief washed over me upon hearing that voice. I heard a series of knocks, indicating someone was trying to assist, and before long, the door creaked open. Gratefully, I thanked the elderly gentleman who had come to my aid. He sighed and remarked, "She never seems to learn, does she? Always finding ways to make life difficult for her daughter-in-law." This kind neighbor was familiar with my husband's family, a distant relative of his. He escorted me to his own home nearby. Upon seeing me, his wife appeared surprised. After the gentleman explained the situation, she warmly welcomed me inside. With a comforting gesture, she offered me a blanket since I was only dressed in pajamas and served me a cup of steaming hot tea. Once I had regained my composure, the elderly gentleman shared with me the unsettling history of my mother-in-law's treatment of her daughters-in-law. "Your mother-in-law has a history of mistreating her son's wives. She's trapped several of them in the bathroom before. The wife of the eldest son was repeatedly locked in there and eventually left the household because of it. And it's not just her. When my husband was engaged to someone else before, the mother-in-law did the same thing to her." The elderly couple had noticed the bathroom light shining through the darkness and grew suspicious, prompting them to come and investigate. They knew about my mother-in-law's past actions and had come to the aid of others in similar situations before. Aware of our marriage, they seemed concerned that my mother-in-law might repeat her harmful behavior. Since it was already late and the main house was locked up, I decided to spend the night with the neighbors. The next morning, I was roused from sleep by the wail of an ambulance siren. Peering out the window, I spotted the ambulance pulling up at my in-laws' place, with my husband standing motionless near the detached bathroom. Curious, I made my way over. Perhaps my husband had mistakenly thought I was still trapped in the bathroom and called for help. But of course, the bathroom was empty. I felt a pang of sympathy for the paramedics, who had been summoned due to my husband's misunderstanding. As soon as my husband laid eyes on me, he erupted, "Why is my mom lying there? Weren't you trapped in the bathroom?" Startled, I glanced inside, only to spot a figure sprawled on the floor. The woman whom the paramedics were tending to sat up, gingerly touching the back of her head. It appeared she wasn't in grave danger, and I recognized her silhouette. It was my mother-in-law. Perplexed as to why she was there, I listened as one of the paramedics explained. "She seems to have taken a fall and lost consciousness. We'll take her to the hospital for a checkup. It looks like she slipped on some soap on the floor." In my panic during the blackout, I must have left things scattered, like the soap. With no light to clean up, it seems my mother-in-law slipped and fell when she entered the bathroom to check on me in the early hours of the morning. As my mother-in-law was wheeled past on a stretcher, she shot me a stern glare. When my husband was taken to the hospital in an ambulance, the neighbors approached and offered their sympathy, saying, "We're relieved you're okay. It's like a form of divine retribution for the mistreatment you've endured as a daughter-in-law." I expressed my gratitude to them once more, realizing that without the elderly neighbors' help, I could have been the one being rushed to the hospital. After changing clothes, I informed my brother-in-law about my mother-in-law's hospitalization. He hurried off to join her there. Left alone, I made my way to the detached bathroom, pondering over the events of the previous night. At the bathroom door, I noticed a stick wedged in to keep it shut. That explained why I couldn't open it. That afternoon, my mother-in-law returned home from the hospital with my husband and brother-in-law, and she directed her anger at me. "If you had stayed in the bathroom and let me know, none of this would have happened." Before I could respond, my husband joined in, expressing his frustration. "Exactly. If Maggie had just stayed put, my mother wouldn't be in this situation. However, my brother-in-law angrily intervened. "What's wrong with you two? Stop this cruel game of locking my sister-in-law in the bathroom." Later, my brother-in-law returned with a travel bag and announced to my husband and mother-in-law, "I'm done taking care of my mother. I'm leaving this house. Do as you please." Unable to endure it any longer, I turned to my brother-in-law and asked, "I'm leaving too. Could you drop me off at the nearest station?" Despite my husband's attempts to stop me, I stood my ground. "Let's get a divorce. You didn't help me when I needed it yesterday. I'll prepare the divorce papers." I got into my brother-in-law's car, and he drove me to the station, apologizing repeatedly. "I'm truly sorry, Maggie. I never imagined you would go through this. Those cruel people are no longer family to me." I returned to my apartment, prepared the divorce papers, and began packing my husband's belongings. When he returned and saw his things packed, he initially thought I was joking about divorce. But his shock turned to anger when he saw the actual papers. "You're ending our marriage over something so trivial? You weren't even hurt, were you?" Realizing it was futile to argue, I silently handed him the papers. With reluctance, he signed them and left the apartment. However, it became evident that he didn't have the means to rent another place or hadn't found one yet. The truth was, throughout our marriage, he had been dependent on my income, often spending recklessly and even accumulating debt. After leaving our home, my husband initially stayed with a coworker. But as time passed, even that support faded, and he found himself increasingly isolated. Losing his home, evading debt collectors, and eventually losing his job, he found himself in a dire financial crisis. My mother-in-law has become a topic of neighborhood gossip, with rumors circulating that she drove her daughter-in-law to divorce. It seems she's now avoided by others, and according to my brother-in-law, she lives a solitary life, much like my husband. With my brother-in-law also gone, she's left to manage on just her pension, facing financial strain. In rural areas, having a car is essential, but with no one at home and a strained relationship with the neighbors, she's unable to receive any assistance. It appears my mother-in-law, abandoned by both family and neighbors, lives alone. As for my husband, he's consumed by his own troubles and lacks the means to aid his mother. After our divorce, I replaced the tacky furniture he chose with pieces I love. I've embarked on a new chapter, hopeful for a brighter future and open to new, positive experiences. The maternity ward was cozy, like basking in the sun. Emily, cuddling her baby, must have been super happy. "Want to hold her?" Emily asked John, who seemed a bit nervous. John scratched his head, feeling awkward. I might drop her. Maybe later." Emily glanced at me, seeming proud as she focused on her baby. It was like she was trying to show off compared to me, someone without kids. "I wish I had a kid," John muttered cheerfully, looking at Emily. Trying not to laugh, I replied seriously, "Well, isn't there one right in front of you?" John and Emily looked confused until someone walked in and handed them something that made their faces go pale. "I'm Sarah, 29 years old. My husband John is turning 32, and we're celebrating our 5th year of marriage. We both work at the same company, but in different departments. We met at work and fell in love. John, a successful salesperson, was quite popular among the female employees for his charm and sales skills. Before we got to know each other, I used to admire him from afar whenever we crossed paths in the hallway. Our first real interaction happened by chance when he helped me pick up some documents I dropped. Sorry, thank you so much. No, it was my fault for bumping into you. No, not at all. I was just spacing out. No, it was me. We couldn't help but find the situation amusing as we exchanged nods back and forth. As we picked up the documents, we shared a laugh and locked eyes. After that, we started chatting whenever we met in the hallway and occasionally went out for drinks or dinner. John's stories about his sales experiences were fascinating, and I understood why he excelled in his job. When we decided to tie the knot, some of my female colleagues were surprised. I left my job when we got married and became a homemaker. But circumstances led me back to work 2 years ago, though at a different company from John's. Since then, we've been working hard together. Although we still have a mortgage, we've managed to buy our own condo and save a bit. Our relationship may not be as romantic as when we first got married, but I believe we're doing well. Sometimes John comes home late, But when he's early, he pitches in with household chores, saying you're working too, Sarah, it's only fair. My friends envy me, saying you've got yourself a great husband. But we do have our share of problems, the biggest being our struggle to have children. We both adore kids and have dreamed of starting a family since we got married. Yet after 5 years, we're still childless. With my age creeping up, I'm starting to consider fertility treatment seriously. Surprisingly, John seems more relaxed about it lately. A few months ago, he was enthusiastic about starting a family together, but lately he seems less interested. He stopped bringing up the topic of children altogether. Don't you want kids anymore? I asked him one day. John looked surprised. Why would you think that? He replied. Feeling a bit frustrated, I said, because you haven't mentioned it lately. John gave me a gentle smile. That's not true, Sarah. I do want to have children with you, but I don't want to pressure you, he explained, hugging me comfortingly. Another concern is the strained relationship between John and my dad. My mom assures me they'll warm up to each other eventually. But whenever John is around my dad, he seems tense. It makes me wonder if he'll ever really get along. It's understandable though, considering my dad is the executive vice president of John's company. When John first came to my house to meet my parents, he was so nervous he could hardly speak. My dad even teased him, "You're one of my salesmen, right?" I got defensive, saying, "John is the best salesman." My dad laughed it off, assuring John it was just a joke, which finally made John smile. Sometimes I worry that John faces challenges at work because his father-in-law knows everything he does. When I bring up my concerns, John brushes them off. It's not so bad when you're the son-in-law of the executive VP. Even the bosses treat you differently, he says. I'm not taking advantage of it, but they're just more understanding, he adds. But doesn't that make work tougher for you? I ask. Nope, he replies, laughing, seemingly unfazed by the situation. The truth is, there's another reason for the tension between John and my dad. 2 years ago, John had a financial mishap unrelated to work, and my dad helped him out. It was a big deal, and it's why I went back to work. I think John feels guilty about it, even though my dad never brings it up. I can see John wants to make my dad proud, not just as a salesman, but as his son-in-law too. Since we don't have kids, we often go on dates on our days off. One day, after watching a movie, we ran into one of John's coworkers while strolling around town looking for a place to eat. Was surprised to see you here, Emily exclaimed, spotting us first. This is one of my coworkers. They also got married after we did, from an office romance, John explained. Emily, who was noticeably pregnant, mentioned she was about to start maternity leave. Thanks for always looking out for my husband, Emily said, her expression twitching slightly. Oh, it's nothing really, I replied, trying to keep it light, but I sensed some tension. It felt like she wasn't entirely friendly towards me. Hey, that's not nice, Emily, her husband scolded her. Sorry about that. We really appreciate your support, he said. He seemed younger than me, but easygoing and friendly. He probably excelled in sales with his calm demeanor. It seemed Emily got along well with John, even touching his arm in front of me, his wife. Her husband Tom watched her with a mix of surprise and irritation. What are you two up to? Her gaze towards me felt challenging. John sensed my discomfort and quickly intervened to ease the tension. Maybe Tom harbored suspicions about John and Emily's relationship, just like I did. Honestly, I didn't have the best impression of Emily, but I was starting to see Tom in a different light. Once doubts creep in, they're hard to shake. While I didn't think Emily, visibly pregnant, would go to a hotel with John, the possibility of infidelity crossed my mind. Deciding to take action rather than dwell on it, I hired a detective and purchased hidden cameras. I installed them in key areas of the house while the detective monitored John's activities outside. If he was cheating, we'd find out. If not, things would return to normal. I often unwind with long baths, finding solace in the warm water. Soaking for at least an hour is my way of rejuvenating. If John was cheating, this would be an opportune time for him. With my smartphone in hand, I checked on John's activities while soaking. Most days, he seemed to be watching TV or working, but occasionally he appeared to be communicating with someone. The motion detecting cameras ensured I wouldn't miss anything, even when I wasn't actively watching. I meticulously reviewed the recordings and audio, and to put it bluntly, my trust in John was shattered. To compound matters, I discovered that John was the father of Emily's baby. While watching the footage, I couldn't help but gasp in disbelief. John was on the phone with Emily, inquiring, "Is our baby all right?" Though I couldn't hear her response, his serious tone indicated he wasn't joking when he replied, "That's wonderful news." During one of John's bath times, I checked his phone and was stunned by the messages exchanged between him and Emily. "Are you okay?" "No suspicions." "Don't worry, he doesn't even know he's infertile." It was a devastating blow to his pride as a man. It felt too heartbreaking to confront him with the truth. Reading their conversation left me feeling unsettled. I couldn't help but wonder if Emily cheated because her husband, Tom, was sterile, or if John justified his infidelity because I wasn't getting pregnant. I scrolled through their exchanges, taking screenshots with my smartphone as evidence. Additionally, I retrieved Tom's contact details from John's phone. Wouldn't anyone in my shoes feel the same desire for revenge upon discovering this betrayal? They say misery loves company, and I made sure to gather ample evidence before reaching out to Tom, just in case he doubted Emily's infidelity or decided to take her side and thwart my plans. I arranged to meet Tom at the cafe without informing Emily or John. To avoid raising suspicion, I called ahead and informed him about Emily and John's affair. He didn't appear overly shocked or distressed when he arrived. When I thanked him for coming, he simply nodded. "Actually, I wanted to talk to you, Sarah, about something," he said. Curious, I inquired, but Tom insisted on hearing my side first. He explained that revealing John's betrayal would be a betrayal in itself, and he needed a compelling reason to do so. I presented Tom with the evidence gathered by the detective and the proof I had collected. As he examined the images discussing sterility, his expression twisted in disbelief. "Emily seems certain about this here. Do you know anything about it?" I shared that we'd been married for 3 years and underwent testing about a year into our marriage. Tom and Emily had been eager to start a family early on, so he found it strange that they hadn't succeeded after a year. After the testing, I never actually saw the results myself. Emily assured me everything was fine on her end, he explained. Listening to his side, I realized the depth of the deception. I pondered why Emily didn't divorce Tom, knowing he couldn't have children. "Oh, that's because Emily is in debt," Tom explained. Apparently, Emily's desire to flaunt her lifestyle led her to rack up debts buying designer bags and clothes she couldn't afford on her salary. Now they were working together to pay off the debt, with the condition that Emily would curb her extravagant spending. Remembering Emily's behavior last time I saw her, her need for attention and luxury made sense. She probably felt threatened by John's attention to me and maybe wanted to make Tom jealous too. "Debt, huh? Sounds like a perfect match for John," I blurted out, earning a puzzled look from Tom. In gratitude for his honesty, I decided to share something about John from 2 years ago. "Interesting," Tom remarked with a smirk, clearly thinking along the same lines as me. "I'm considering a divorce," I confessed. "Me too. It's comforting to know you're thinking the same," Tom replied. Then he revealed something he had been holding back. "Was your first encounter with John really accidental?" he asked. I nodded. "Yes. I dropped my documents and John helped me pick them up." "It wasn't an accident," Tom interjected. "What? He did it on purpose to create an opportunity?" According to Tom, John had noticed my interest in him for a while. Tom was convinced that given the opportunity, John could get close to me. As I felt my cheeks flush with embarrassment at my own obviousness, Tom continued, "If his interest had solely been in you, Sarah, it would have been one thing. But that wasn't the case." "How so?" I inquired. "Because of who you are, the executive's daughter." John seemed quite pleased when he boasted to Tom about getting close to the executive director's daughter, meaning me. He seemed to view marrying me as a shortcut to advancing his career. It all makes sense now. That's why he was so mindful of my father and got so jittery when he met us, I realized. He even went around at work telling people he could easily talk to my father-in-law, the executive director, John bragged. I hadn't known about this since I'd left the company. John had brushed it off, claiming people were just being considerate on their own. But that's not the case. He married me to exploit me, to use my father's position as a threat. Yet he turns into a nervous wreck in front of my dad. It's pathetic, I confided in Tom. "Can you get tested again?" "I'll do the same," I suggested. As for John and Emily, I had no intention of forgiving either of them. John had been antsy and excited for days leading up to the celebration of the birth. "What should we get for the celebration?" "It's a boy." he'd exclaim happily, selecting gifts. The maternity ward greeted us with warmth and sunlight upon our arrival. Emily and Tom warmly welcomed us, and when John presented the clothes he had chosen, Emily's face lit up with joy. Tom excused himself to fetch drinks. With John attentively watching, Emily held the baby, radiating happiness. "Would you like to hold him?" John asked me with a smile, surrounded by our colleagues. John hesitated, scratching his head. "Nah," he mumbled, glancing at me. Sensing my lack of enthusiasm, he quickly composed himself. "I'm afraid I might drop him. Maybe later," he added sheepishly. Emily glanced at me, then chuckled, focusing back on the baby. It was evident she was subtly competing with me, knowing I didn't have children. "I'd love to have a kid of my own," John remarked cheerfully, his gaze fixed on Emily. I almost laughed out loud at his comment but managed to maintain a serious expression. "Well, isn't there one right in front of you?" I quipped, trying to sound casual. Both John and Emily looked at me with confusion just as the door to the ward swung open abruptly. Tom entered with a couple of bottles of water, apologizing for the delay as he handed them out, slipping a folded piece of paper to Emily. Emily's expression shifted from confusion to shock as she unfolded the paper, revealing a divorce notice. "What is this, some kind of joke?" she exclaimed in disbelief. John, equally stunned, glanced at the document in her hand. "Come on, Tom, this isn't the time for jokes. It's in poor taste," John remarked, his tone flat. "It's no joke," Tom replied firmly. Emily's confusion turned to pale confusion, while John moved to confront Tom. I stepped in front of John and handed him my own set of divorce papers already unfolded. "I'm not joking either," I declared. Moving to Emily's bedside, I laid out photos showing John visiting her house frequently during her maternity leave. "What were you doing at my house when my husband wasn't home?" I demanded. John, attempting to explain, claimed he was merely being considerate, checking in on Emily since they started at the company together. "Yeah, John was just being thoughtful," Emily chimed in defensively. Their attempts to justify themselves seemed almost comical, as if they could talk their way out of the situation. It was absurd, especially considering their late-night communications. Was that concern for Emily or for the child in her belly, perhaps your own? I challenged John, sensing his anger rising. "Stop it, Sarah. Emily is my colleague, and it's natural for her to be anxious about her first child," John retorted, his tone sharp. "You're just jealous of me, aren't you?" "Just because you can't have kids," Emily interjected defensively, her words dripping with venom. I couldn't help but snort at her accusation, which only seemed to fuel her anger as she glared at me, her face flushed with frustration. "Don't listen to her, Tom. This child is truly yours," Emily insisted, attempting to divert attention from the conversation. But Tom's mocking laugh coincided with me showing Emily the incriminating evidence on my smartphone. A recording of John joking about his own infertility, followed by a video of him inquiring about the well-being of our child. "See, should we check who you were really talking to?" I challenged as Emily's bravado faltered in the face of undeniable proof. "We're just coworkers, joking around," Emily stammered, trying to regain her composure. I glanced down at her with pity as she met my gaze defiantly. "Hold on to him properly, Emily. He's a precious life," I advised gently as the baby stirred in her arms, almost falling. The sudden cry of the baby pierced the tense atmosphere. "Shut up," Emily snapped, just as Tom unfolded a piece of paper. "I can't have kids, Emily. You know that." Tom's voice was calm but laced with bitterness as he addressed his wife, who froze under his gaze. "Let's get a divorce," we both declared to our partners, the finality of the decision hanging heavily in the air. John, still attempting to salvage the situation, pointed a finger at me. "This is all because of your infertility, Sarah. There must be something wrong with you, just like with Tom," he accused. I felt a surge of anger rise within me. "It's not me, it's you, John. And don't you dare speak to me with such arrogance, especially when we're on the brink of divorce," I retorted, tossing the test results in his direction. The paper briefly stuck to his face before fluttering to the ground. "Who do you think you are, speaking to me like that? Did you believe blaming me would absolve you of your actions?" I demanded, spelling it out for him once more. "Divorce. Do you even comprehend the gravity of that word?" John's face drained of color as he stammered an apology, begging for forgiveness. "Huh." Emily's astonished voice interjected as John pleaded. Tom and I exchanged a knowing glance and chuckled softly, reflecting on John's past mistake of accumulating a hefty debt through stock trading, which my father had covered. I had started working to repay it. My father's assistance came with a condition. John signed a promissory note. In addition to alimony, John would now face relentless pursuit for repayment from my father. With Emily's debt added to the mix, their future looked bleak. Well, best of luck to you both. You'll need it. We'll settle the rest through our lawyers, I declared, leaving John on the floor in tears as Tom and I exited the hospital room. My father, even angrier than me, enlisted the help of a lawyer he trusted to extract every cent from John, even tapping into John's share of our joint assets. But it still wasn't enough. John, now remarried to Emily but unaware of each other's financial burdens, faced criticism from Emily's parents upon discovering the truth, leading to yet another divorce. Emily's parents, while temporarily covering her debts, eventually had to send her back home, where she endured daily reproach. Despite the hardships, their grandchild, the innocent babe, was showered with love and lacked for nothing, which eased my concerns. John, unable to remain at the company, resigned and now resides in a modest apartment, toiling from dawn till dusk to meet his obligations of debt, alimony, and child support. Meanwhile, I've settled into a rented apartment, embracing solitary living. Tom and I have become drinking buddies, meeting up on weekends for quiet moments of camaraderie. He may not be as chatty as John, but I appreciate the peaceful companionship he offers.